During Black History Month, we often think of the heroes of the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King Jr., John Lewis.
Yeah, just to name a few. And there's one woman who walked the walk with them. Gurveer Densa speaks with Xernona Clayton, a giant in her own right.
When we work together, we're making a better world.
Step into Xernona Clayton's office and you're walking into the pages of history.
If you think you can, you will. That's an attitude I have.
At 90 years young, it's an attitude she wears beautifully with grace, dignity, and humility.
Violence is self-defeating.
Inspired by the challenge of Martin Luther King Jr., Xernona Clayton moved to Atlanta in 1965 at the height of the civil rights movement. She was working with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
When I came here, black people stayed on one side of town, whites stayed on the other.
She didn't like what she saw.
I found a lot of things wrong with the city. And I wasn't just going to be here and complain. I want to help make a difference.
Through her persistent civic involvement, things began to change.
I didn't know whether they're going to take away the deposits, but they did. I didn't know they're going to find some way to clean the streets, but they did. I didn't think the hospital was going to change its policies because I thought they ought to, but they did.
In 1968, Xernona Clayton became the first black woman in the South to host a regular primetime show on Atlanta television. The move coming after she made a speech about media coverage of segregated pools across the city.
A lily white environment, talking about a lily white shutout, didn't make sense to me. An all-white station, to me, didn't have much leg to stand on to talk about how this all-white action over here was unacceptable.
In the 1970s, Miss Clayton joined Turner Broadcasting. She would spend 30 years there as a corporate executive. But perhaps the most remarkable chapter in her life was successfully convincing the Grand Dragon of the KKK to renounce the Klan.
Because if you change a person's heart, you can perhaps change his behavior.
She founded the Trumpet Awards, recognizing African-American contributions for all people for that same reason, hoping people would see past color.
The Trumpet Awards did that in so many ways. We showed their accomplishments. People who didn't need to be denied opportunity, but you'd be better off if you embraced them in your companies because they had a commitment to work like anybody else.
We know that you really don't need much.
Rooted deep in her still is Dr. King's message of love over hate. She weighs that against a changing world today.
No peace.
As a new generation renews calls for civil and human rights and battles racial injustice and looks to the future. That's why she's especially pleased with the 2020 election.
I was thrilled beyond description.
While no longer on the front lines, Xernona Clayton remains engaged, genuine, and still inspiring.
We could all sit around and occupy space without doing anything. I don't want to just occupy space. I want to fill that space with something good. I want to fill my space with something that will make a difference in somebody else's life.
For CBS 46 News, I'm Gurveer Densa.
Black History Month is brought to you by Calvin Smith Law, the injury lawyers.